I held the eviction notice. The words were a blur, but the weight of the paper in my hand was real. A cold, heavy truth. The ink on the page said my name, but the betrayal was all his. My son, Jareth. He stood on the lawn, the afternoon sun glinting off his expensive watch. He didn't look at me, but at the rusted-out shell of my old Ford F-150. A smirk twisted his lips as he shook his head. "Lyle, get a real vehicle. That thing belongs in a junkyard." The words were a physical blow. The old truck was more than metal, it was a promise. It was every Saturday we'd spent working on it, every trip to the lake, every memory we'd built. He had just thrown me out of the home my wife and I had raised him in, a home he claimed he was doing me a favor by buying. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know what was coming. He thought he had me broken. He thought I was just some old man with a worthless truck. What he didn't know was that truck held a secret. And in 3 days, with his fortune in flames, my $83 million son would be on his knees begging for that old truck. Before I begin this story, can you tell me where in the world you're listening to from? The day started like any other. The sun came up slow over the old porch swing, painting the worn wood a soft gold. The air smelled of dew and freshly cut grass, a familiar comfort. But the feeling in my gut was anything but. It had been gnawing at me for 2 weeks, ever since Jareth had called with the news. Not about the money, not about the 83 million, the other news, the demand. He wanted us out. He said he was going to buy the house, our house, and turn it into some kind of rental property for a tax write-off. A tax write-off. The words tasted like bile. He spoke about our home, the one my wife Raina and I had built with our own hands, as if it were a business expense. I remembered the day we bought it. The bank had laughed at us, 2 kids with nothing but dreams and a down payment saved in a shoebox. Raina, she had just smiled, a quiet confidence in her eyes. "We'll make it a home," she said. And we did. Every scratch in the doorframe, every chip in the paint, held a story. Now they were just assets. The betrayal was like a physical ache in my chest. He wasn't just kicking us out, he was erasing us. The home was the last piece of Raina I had left. She had been gone 2 years now. Her presence, her light, still filled every room. Soon, that would be gone too. I sat on the steps, the eviction notice a paper brick in my hand. Jareth pulled up in his new car, a sleek black thing that looked like it belonged on a movie screen. The engine hummed with a quiet power that my old truck could only dream of. He got out, not with a hug, not with a hello, but with a stiff nod. "Dad, did you get the notice?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It's official now. The paperwork is finalized." I just looked at him, at the stranger standing on my lawn. This wasn't my son, the boy who used to fall asleep on the couch, his head on my lap. This was a man in a tailor-made suit, a man who spoke in terms of leverage and liquidating assets. He walked over to my truck, running his hand over the dented fender. "You know, you should just junk this thing. It's an eyesore, doesn't reflect well on me." He laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no warmth. A guy who owns a company worth 83 million can't have his father driving a heap like this. He didn't see the history. He didn't see the blood, sweat, and tears that were in that truck. He didn't see the promise that was made in that truck. He just saw a junk car that needed to go. My heart sank, a slow, painful descent. He kept talking, but I wasn't listening. The words were just noise. I watched his mouth move, a perfectly sculpted mouth that was now forming cold, alien sentences. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask about Raina's garden. He didn't ask if I was okay. He was only concerned with a piece of paper, a deadline, and his perfect image. He was a million miles away, a universe away from the boy who used to cling to my leg. He had become something I didn't recognize, a stranger in my home, a ghost of the boy I had loved. He finally turned to leave, his face a mask of indifference. He had what he came for, the paperwork, the final nail in the coffin. He had erased me in the home Raina and I had built. "Look, Dad," he said, not unkindly, but with a business finality. "This is a good thing. I'm giving you a fresh start. You'll thank me one day." He turned and walked away. I stood there watching the back of his perfect suit. The sun was going down now, and the house was a silhouette against the fading light. He was gone. The silence was deafening. I thought of everything we had done for him, every sacrifice, every moment. I thought of the promise he had made, the promise that he was now breaking. The last piece of my life with Raina was about to be bulldozed. I looked at the eviction notice and then at the old truck. He had no idea what that truck meant. He had no idea what he had done, and he had no idea that in just 3 days, everything he thought he had would come crashing down and he would be begging me for that truck. Before all this, before the money and the betrayal, our lives were simple. My world revolved around 2 things, Raina and Jareth. The 3 of us were a team, a small, unbreakable unit. I worked at the local factory, a job that paid the bills but ate at my soul. My hands were always covered in grease, the smell of steel and oil a constant presence. But every time I came home, Reyna would have a hot meal waiting, and Jareth would run to the door, a smudge of dirt on his cheek and a wide, honest smile. He was a curious boy, always taking things apart just to see how they worked. He'd bring me broken clocks and toasters, his little brow furrowed in concentration. "Dad, can you fix this?" he'd ask. And together we would. Those were the best times. Working with my hands, teaching my son how to build something instead of just buying it. I taught him how to work on the old Ford. It was a rite of passage, a secret language we shared. Every oil change, every tire rotation was a lesson in life. "You take care of the things that take care of you," I'd tell him, and he'd nod, his small face serious. That truck was our canvas. We painted it, we fixed it, we made it our own. It wasn't a car, it was a testament to our bond. Reyna, she was the quiet strength of our family. She was a school teacher, her days filled with the chatter of young minds. She brought a gentle peace to our lives, a calm that balanced out the chaos of factory work and a rambunctious sun. She had a way of seeing the world in color, even when it was gray. When the factory announced layoffs and our world felt like it was shrinking, she didn't panic. She just smiled and said, "We have each other, Lyle. That's all that matters." We made it work, always finding a way. We went without so Jareth could have more. We drove the old truck to the movies on a Friday night, the three of us packed into the front seat, laughed. We took it on trips to the lake, Jareth in the back with his fishing pole, his face a mix of pure joy and anticipation. We were a family built on simple things, on shared laughter and hard work. The truck, the house, the factory, they were just backdrops to the real story. The story of us. The first crack in our world, the first whisper of a future I couldn't have imagined, came when Jareth was 17. He had just finished his junior year of high school. We were sitting on the porch, a warm summer evening settling in around us. I had a beer in my hand, and he was drawing in a notebook, a serious look on his face. He'd always been a good student, but I assumed he'd follow in my footsteps, maybe get a job at the plant, start an apprenticeship. I thought he was drawing a blueprint for a new engine. "What's that, son?" I asked, leaning over. He held it up. It wasn't an engine. It was a graph, a complex chart with lines and arrows I didn't understand. "It's a business plan," he said, his voice full of an excitement I hadn't heard before. "For a startup, I want to go to business school, at Princeton." The words hit me like a physical blow. Princeton, a world away. I had always envisioned him working alongside me, building something with his hands, like I had taught him. I saw a future of solid ground, of a trade passed down from father to son. But his world was a world of graphs, of numbers I couldn't comprehend. The distance between our dreams felt impossibly vast. It was the first time I felt like a stranger to my own son. It was the first time I felt the deep, hollow fear that he was slipping away. The conversation that followed was strained. I tried to explain the value of a trade, the security of a skill. I talked about how proud I would be to see him at the factory, to have him carry on the legacy of our family. But he just shook his head, his eyes on the graph. "Dad, that's old world. This is the future. This is where the real money is." The words stung. I looked at our house, at the calloused hands that had built it, at the truck in the driveway that had hauled the lumber. All of it felt small, irrelevant, in the face of his ambition. Reyna, bless her heart, put her hand on mine. "Lyle, he has to follow his own path." Her words were a balm, but the wound was already there. We agreed to support him, to do whatever it took to make his dream a reality. I told him he would be the first in our family to go to a 4-year university, and that I couldn't be prouder. But as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sending him away, not to a better life, but to a different one, a life that wouldn't have a place for me in it. That night, Jareth looked at me and Reyna, his face earnest and full of gratitude. "I won't ever forget this, Dad. I'll make you proud. I'll pay you back for everything." The promise hung in the air, a beautiful and fragile thing. And I believed him. I believed him with every fiber of my being. The years that followed were a blur of sacrifice. To pay for Jareth's tuition, I took on a second job at a gas station, a graveyard shift that lasted from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. My days were a cycle of factory work, a few hours of sleep, and then the long, dark hours of selling cigarettes and filling up gas tanks. My body ached. My mind was a constant haze of exhaustion. But I didn't complain. Every time I filled a car, I imagined it was a small deposit into Jareth's future. Every dollar I made was a brick in the foundation of his success. I knew it was worth it. I just had to keep going. I saw less of Reyna, and even less of Jareth, who was buried in his studies. The calls home were short, filled with jargon I didn't understand. Equity, market share, seed funding. He was learning a new language, and I was being left behind. I would ask him about his classes, and he would tell me about his business club, about the contacts he was making. It was a different world. He was no longer my son, the boy who loved to get his hands dirty. He was a future businessman, a future I couldn't comprehend. Rena, she was my anchor. She worked double shifts at the school, tutoring kids after hours just to help with the cost. I saw the strain on her face, the deep lines that were now etched around her eyes. She never said a word, never complained about the long hours, the constant exhaustion. She just smiled, that same quiet, reassuring smile she always had. But I could see her fading. The vibrancy that had always been a part of her was slowly being drained away. One night, I came home from the factory, my muscles screaming in protest. I found her on the couch, her face pale, a blanket pulled tight around her. I knelt beside her, my heart a lump in my throat. "Rena, are you okay?" I asked. She just shook her head, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "It's too much, Lyle," she whispered. "It's just too much." The words were a knife to my heart. I had failed her. I had pushed us too hard for Jareth's dream. But we couldn't stop. The payments were due. Jareth's future was at stake. The final blow came when the tuition for his last semester arrived. It was more than we had anticipated. We had nothing left. I looked at our bank account, and I felt a wave of despair. We had given everything, and it still wasn't enough. I thought of selling the truck, but the thought was a physical pain. It was a part of our family, a living memory of happier time. I walked out to the garage, the smell of oil and gasoline a nostalgic comfort. I ran my hand over the fender, the cold metal a stark contrast to my trembling fingers. I couldn't sell it. Not the truck. It was all I had left of me and Jareth. As I stood there, my eyes fell on a dusty box on the top shelf. Inside was a leather-bound book, Rena's father's book, a family heirloom that had been passed down for generations. It was filled with his notes and sketches from his time as a master carpenter. She had always told me it was priceless. I held it in my hands, the weight of the book a heavy reminder of all we had sacrificed. I knew what I had to do. I had to sell it. It was the only way to get the money we needed. It was a piece of Rena's family history, a piece of our story. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The next day, I went to a local antique dealer, the book wrapped in a cloth. I didn't want to see it go. I told the man what it was. He looked at it with an expert's eye, and then a slow smile spread across his face. He made an offer, a generous one. I accepted. As I walked out of the shop, the envelope of cash, a crisp, painful weight in my pocket, I felt a part of me die. I had sold a piece of our history, a piece of Rena for Jareth's future. I felt a surge of resentment, a flash of anger at the boy who had no idea what we were giving up. But the feeling passed just as quickly. All I had left was the hope that this was the right thing to do, that Jareth's promise was worth it, that he would make us proud, that he would remember the sacrifices we made. I called him that night, and I didn't mention the book. I just told him the tuition was paid. I could hear the relief in his voice. "Thanks, Dad," he said. "I won't ever forget this. I'll make you proud. I'll pay you back for everything." He was a world away, and yet his words were the only thing that gave me hope. I hung up the phone, and I looked at Rena, who was staring out the window, her face pale in the moonlight. I didn't tell her what I had done. I couldn't. He got a job at a startup, a small tech firm in a city far away. At first, the calls were still frequent. He'd talk about the long hours, the challenges, the excitement of building something from nothing. He was still the enthusiastic boy I knew, just with bigger ideas. Raina and I would listen, our hearts full of pride. We knew we had made the right choice, that he was doing what he was meant to do. But slowly, the calls changed. They became less frequent, and when they did come, they were shorter, more formal. "Hey, Dad. Just calling to say hello. Super busy right now. I'll call you back soon." Soon never came. He started talking about stock options, about his mentor, about the company's potential for growth. It was all a world away from the factory floor and the gas station. He'd send us money, a monthly check that was always more than we needed. We didn't want his money. We wanted our son back. Raina's health took a turn for the worse. The stress of Jareth's college, the long hours, the constant worry, it had taken its toll. The doctor said it was her heart. She was frail now, her skin thin and papery. I called Jareth, my voice trembling with worry. "Jareth, your mother isn't doing well. She needs you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Dad, I can't right now. I'm in the middle of a huge project. This could be big. For all of us. He sounded exasperated, as if I was being a nuisance. The words hit me hard. He thought it was about money, about a future he could buy for us. He didn't understand. We didn't want money. We wanted him. We wanted his presence, his love. He didn't offer to come home. He just offered to send more money. I'll transfer some extra funds to your account. Get her the best doctors. Anything you need. The words were empty. A cold comfort. I hung up the phone, a deep sense of despair settling over me. He was a million miles away, and he was getting further and further away with every passing day. A year later, the company announced its IPO. Jareth called, his voice bubbling with a manic energy I had never heard before. Dad, it's happening. The company is going public. Everything we worked for is finally happening. The words felt hollow. I looked at Raina, who was sleeping peacefully in her bed, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her sacrifice, the reason he was where he was, had nearly killed her. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him what he had done, what he had taken from us, but I couldn't. I just listened to him ramble on about the stock market and investors. He was so far gone, so lost in his own world, that he didn't even notice the silence on my end of the line. He just assumed I was happy, that this was the moment we had all been waiting for. I hung up the phone, and I went and sat beside Raina's bed. I held her frail hand in mine, and I knew the dream had come true. But at what cost? He had achieved everything he had ever wanted, but he had lost himself in the process. He had become a stranger. I looked at the photograph of the three of us on our first trip in the truck, our smiles wide and genuine. That time felt like a lifetime ago, a different world, a different family, a different me. The next morning, a wire transfer for $100,000 showed up in our account. He hadn't even bothered to call to tell us. He had just sent the money. A silent gesture. A cold, empty promise. I had a feeling that this was just the beginning, that the money, the success, would only make him more distant. I had a terrible feeling that he wasn't done with us yet. The money was just a weapon, a tool he would use to manipulate us. I had no idea just how right I was. I was in the kitchen, making toast, when the call came. The number on the screen was familiar, but the feeling it gave me was not. It was Jareth. I answered, my voice a shaky thing in the silent house. Dad, he said, his voice full of a triumphant, almost manic energy. It's done. The IPO. We closed this morning. The words hit me like a train. I'm finalizing the purchase. The lawyers need a clean deed, and they need it fast. The words hit me like a physical blow. 2 weeks. That wasn't enough time to pack a lifetime of memory. That wasn't enough time to say goodbye to the place that had been the foundation of our family. I tried to argue, my voice a quiet protest. Jareth, we can't. Your mother is sick. She needs stability. She needs to be in her own bed. He was silent for a moment, and I felt a flicker of hope. He still had a heart, didn't he? He still cared about his mother. But the hope was quickly extinguished. I'll have movers come. They'll pack everything up for you. The new place is already furnished. It'll be a smooth transition. Stop making this difficult, Dad. This is for the best. For your own good. The words were patronizing, dismissive. He was a master of his own universe, and he was making a decision for me. I felt the bile rise in my throat. This wasn't about a smooth transition. This was about power. This was about him showing me that he was in control, that his money gave him the right to dictate our lives. He was going to use his wealth to bulldoze over everything we had built. I felt a terrible sense of dread. I was losing my home, and I was losing my son. Raina, frail and weak in her bed, had heard the conversation. She had a look of quiet resignation on her face. Lyle, she said, her voice a papery whisper, don't fight him. It's too much. Just do what he says. The words were a dagger to my heart. She had always been the strong one, the one who fought for what was right. Now she was giving up. She was telling me to surrender to our son's will. I looked at her, at the quiet defeat in her eyes. I knew she was tired. The long years of sacrifice, the constant worry, had finally broken her spirit. She was ready to give up the fight. I couldn't blame her. She had given everything. Now she was just too tired to fight anymore. I had no choice. I had to do what she said. I had to pack up our lives and move to a new, sterile place that would never be our home. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The house, the place that had been our home for 40 years, was now a business transaction. A tax write-off. I went into the garage, the smell of oil and gasoline a nostalgic comfort. I found the old key to the truck, the one I had made for Jareth when he was a boy. I held it in my hand, the cold metal a stark reminder of a promise he had made, a promise he was now breaking. I started packing. I packed up the photographs, the old memories, the dusty knickknacks that had no monetary value but were worth more than all the money in the world to me. I packed up Raina's blankets, her books, the quiet things that had made our house a home. Every box was a funeral. Every box was another nail in the coffin of our life. The movers came, big, impersonal men who spoke to me in short, clipped sentences. They loaded everything onto a truck, and I watched our lives, our memories, disappear into the back of a van. I felt like I was watching my own funeral. Jareth wasn't there. He was probably in some fancy office, celebrating his latest business deal, a new tax write-off. He didn't care about the people he was bulldozing over. He didn't care about the memories he was erasing. He just cared about his numbers. The money had turned him into a monster. As the last box was loaded, I felt an emptiness in my chest. I had lost our home. I had lost my son. All I had left was the old truck, a defiant, rusted-out monument to a better time. I looked at it, and I felt a flicker of defiance. They could take the house. They could take the money. But they couldn't take my memories. And they couldn't take the truck. But as I watched the moving truck pull away, I couldn't help but wonder what he was planning next. I had a terrible feeling that this was just the beginning. I had a terrible feeling that he was going to come back for the last thing I had left. The condo felt like a hospital room. The walls were a sterile white. The furniture was sleek and cold. The large windows looked out on a city I didn't know. It was a beautiful place, a place most people would kill for, but it wasn't home. It was a cage. I felt like a museum piece placed in a display case for others to admire. Raina, her frail body lost in the new, oversized bed, looked pale and lifeless. The new environment, the lack of familiar things, had taken a toll on her. She just stared out the window, her eyes hollow, a blank expression on her face. She was a ghost in her own life. The silence in the condo was deafening. There were no sounds of our old house, no familiar creaks in the floorboards, no sound of the porch swing. It was a world of sterile silence, and it was slowly killing us both. I felt a surge of resentment every time I looked at the expensive furniture, the modern art on the walls. It was all a testament to Jareth's success, and a reminder of everything we had sacrificed to get him there. It was a constant, painful reminder of the chasm that now existed between us. Jareth came to visit 2 weeks after we moved in. He brought his wife, Cassidy. She was a tall, thin woman with a pinched look on her face. She looked at our old photographs with a look of distaste, as if she were looking at trash. "Oh, Jareth," she said, her voice a nasal whine. "Look at this old thing. We should just have it thrown out. It doesn't fit the aesthetic." She was talking about a photograph of Raina and me on our first date, a moment I had cherished for 30 years. Jareth just smiled, a bland, non-committal smile. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend our memory. He was just a silent accomplice to her disdain. They sat on the new couch, a sleek, gray thing that felt like sitting on a rock. He talked about his new investments, his business trips, the new partnerships he was building. It was all a world away from me, from our simple, quiet lives. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them what they had done. I wanted to tell them about Raina's failing health, about the silence in the apartment, about the emptiness in my heart, but I didn't. I just sat there, a silent spectator to their perfect plastic lives. As they were leaving, Jareth put his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like a cold, empty formality. "Look, Dad, I know this is hard for you, but it's for the best. You'll thank me one day. It's a clean slate, a fresh start. This place is a better reflection of who we are now." The words were a dagger to my heart. He didn't see me. He saw a project, a fixer-upper, a person who needed to be polished and cleaned to fit into his new perfect world. I looked at him, at the stranger standing in front of me, and I felt a deep, profound sadness. I had lost my son. He was a ghost, a perfect, empty shell of the boy I had loved. He had taken everything, and yet there was one thing he couldn't take. The truck, the old, rusted-out shell that sat in the garage of our old house. I felt a small flicker of defiance. They couldn't have that. It was the one thing he couldn't buy, the one thing he couldn't control. "Jareth," I said, my voice quiet, a tremor of emotion in my chest. "What about the truck?" He was silent for a moment, and then he laughed, a short, sharp sound that had no warmth. "Oh, that thing, I sold it, Dad. Had to liquidate assets. You know how it is. It was just a beat-up piece of junk. Doesn't fit in with the new aesthetic." The words were a physical blow. The betrayal was complete. He had taken everything, and he had lied to my face. The truck was a symbol of our bond, our history. He had just sold it for scrap. I had a terrible feeling that he wasn't done yet. I had a terrible feeling that this was just the beginning. I had a terrible feeling that he was going to come back for the last thing I had left. I just didn't know what that would be. Raina died 2 months later. Her heart, a fragile thing that had endured so much, simply gave out. She passed away in her sleep, in the new cold bed that was not her own. The nurses, strangers to her and to me, were kind, but their words were just empty sounds in the silence. My world, already fractured, shattered into a million pieces. The silence in the condo was no longer a symbol of our new life. It was a testament to her absence. I felt completely and utterly alone. I was a ghost in my own life. I felt like I was floating, disconnected from reality. The funeral was a blur of faces I didn't know, of platitudes I didn't believe. Jareth was there, his suit impeccably tailored, his face a mask of practiced grief. He was on his phone for most of the service, texting, checking emails, his thumb flying across the screen with a manic urgency. He was a million miles away, a universe away from the boy who had cried on my shoulder when his dog died. He was a businessman now, and even grief was a distraction, a nuisance. I looked at him, at the stranger who was my son, and I felt a deep, profound sense of loss. I had not just lost my wife. I had lost my son, too. After the funeral, Jareth came to the condo. He sat on the couch, his back stiff and straight, his phone in his hand. He wasn't there to comfort me. He wasn't there to mourn his mother. He was there to talk business. "Dad, I need you to sign some paperwork," he said, his voice flat. "It's for the house. The lawyers need a final signature." The words were a physical blow. He was doing this now, at his mother's funeral? I just looked at him, my heart a lump in my throat. I couldn't believe his callousness. "Jareth," I said, my voice quiet, a tremor of emotion in my chest. "You sold the truck." "My truck." He looked up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Dad, we already talked about this. It was just an old piece of junk. I had to liquidate assets. It was a business decision." The words were cold, devoid of emotion. He didn't see the history. He didn't see the memories. He just saw a number, an asset he could liquidate. The lie was so easy, so effortless. I felt a surge of anger. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a liar. He had betrayed me, and he had lied to my face about it. I was losing my mind. This couldn't be happening. I felt a surge of rage. I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. "It wasn't a piece of junk, Jareth. It was your childhood. It was everything we had. It was our family." I yelled, my voice a broken thing in the sterile silence of the condo. He just looked at me, his face a mask of indifference. He didn't feel my pain. He didn't see my rage. He just saw a man he didn't recognize, a man who was getting in the way of his business. He sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Dad, I have to go. My flight leaves in an hour. We'll talk about this later." He stood up and he walked to the door. I watched him go, a stranger in a perfectly tailored suit. He didn't look back. He didn't say goodbye. He just left. I stood there watching him go, and I felt a wave of despair. I was alone. Completely, utterly, and devastatingly alone. Just as I was about to sink into my chair, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there was a man in a business suit. He held a piece of paper in his hand, a paper that looked suspiciously like the last one I had received. "Mr. Lyle," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "I have an eviction notice for you. Your son, Mr. Jareth, has sold the property. The new owners need you out by the end of the month." The words were a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. He had done it again. He had taken everything, and now he was kicking me out of the last place I had left. He was not a son, but a monster, a predator. He was going to take everything, and he wasn't going to stop until I had nothing left. I was adrift. The eviction notice was a paper brick in my hand, a testament to my son's final act of betrayal. He had taken our home, our memories, my wife, and now he was taking the last place I had left. I walked out of the condo, the door closing behind me with a quiet, final click. I didn't know where to go. I had no home, no money, and no family. I was a man with nothing. I walked for hours, the city a blur of lights and noises. My feet ached, but I didn't care. I just kept walking. I was a ghost, a man who didn't belong anywhere. I felt a wave of despair, a cold, numbing horror that had settled over me. I was alone, completely, utterly, and devastatingly alone. I finally found myself in front of Boone's garage. Boone, my old friend, the man who had worked on my truck with me for 30 years. He was the only person I had left. I pushed open the garage door, and the smell of oil and gasoline was a familiar, comforting presence. Boone looked up from under the hood of a car, his face covered in grease. "Lyle," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and concern. "What are you doing here? You look like you've been through hell." The words were a floodgate. I told him everything. I told him about Jareth, about the money, about the house, about the condo, and about the eviction notice. I told him about the truck. He listened, his face a mask of quiet rage. He didn't say a word. He just nodded, his eyes filled with a deep, profound sadness. When I was done, he just shook his head. "That boy," he said, his voice a low growl. "I should have known. He came here, Lyle. A few weeks ago. He came here with a check. Said he wanted to buy the truck. Said he needed it for a project. Said it was worth nothing to him, but he'd pay me $1,000 for it, just to get it off his hands." I looked at him and I saw the stranger. I saw the greed in his eyes. I told him no. I told him that truck wasn't for sale. I told him that truck was more than a piece of metal. It was your life. It was your family. It was everything you had. He got angry. He said I was a fool. He said he'd just buy it from a junkyard. I told him to go to hell. My heart stopped. He had tried to get the truck. He had lied to me. He had tried to steal the last thing I had left. The betrayal was so deep, so profound, that it felt like a physical wound. But then Boone smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "I didn't just tell him no, Lyle. I called your son a monster and his wife a wicked witch. That made me feel better. I kept it safe for you. It's right here." He gestured to a corner of the garage, and there it was. My truck. My old, beat-up, rusted-out truck. It was covered in a tarp, but I knew it was there. I felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief and gratitude. Boone had saved it. He had saved the last piece of my life, the last piece of Raina, the last piece of Jareth. I walked over to the truck, and I pulled off the tarp. The metal was cold, the paint was peeling, but it was beautiful. It was a monument to a better time, to a different life. I ran my hand over the fender, the cold metal a stark contrast to my trembling fingers. I felt a wave of love for this old piece of junk. It was all I had left. Boone handed me the keys, the same keys I had given Jareth when he was a boy. "It's all filled up, Lyle. Ready to go. I figured you might need it." The words were a comfort, a quiet promise of a future I didn't know. I looked at Boone, at the old friend who had saved me from complete ruin, and I felt a wave of gratitude. He was the only family I had left. I got into the truck, and I turned the key. The engine sputtered to life, a low rumble that was music to my ears. It was a beautiful sound. It was the sound of a past I thought was gone forever. It was the sound of hope. I looked at Boone and I nodded. He just smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. He knew. He knew what I had to do. I had to fight back. I had to get my life back. And I knew exactly where to start. I had a truck, and I had a plan. The engine's rumble was a living thing. A familiar heartbeat against the cold, quiet despair of the last few months. The smell of worn upholstery, oil, and dust filled the cab. A sensory balm that took me back in time. I drove, not to a destination, but away from everything I knew. I drove with the windows down, the cold night air whipping past my face, cleansing me. I drove past the old factory where I'd spent 40 years, its windows dark and lifeless. I drove past the local diner where Raina and I used to get coffee on Sunday mornings. Every familiar landmark was a punch to the gut, a memory of a time that was gone forever. But as I drove, the memories didn't just hurt. They healed. I remembered the night I brought Raina home in this truck after our first date. I remembered Jared, a little boy, asleep in the front seat, his head on Raina's lap. I remembered the feeling of being a family, a small, unbreakable unit against the world. I had lost all of that. But I still had the truck. I still had the memories. A memory came to me, a quiet, forgotten moment from just before Raina got sick. We were in the kitchen, a late afternoon sun slanting through the window. She was humming a song I couldn't place, her hands kneading dough on the counter. Her movements were slow, methodical. She looked up at me, a serious look on her face. "Lyle," she said, her voice quiet, a whisper in the silent house. "Promise me something." I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. "Anything, Raina." She looked at me, a flicker of worry in her eyes. "If anything ever happens to me, if things go bad, if he changes, don't let him have everything." Her words were a jolt. I didn't understand what she was talking about. What could possibly go wrong? Jareth was a good kid. He was a good son. She just shook her head, a sad smile on her face. I have a feeling. I've seen him change, Lyle. The world is changing him. He's becoming distant, Just promise me you'll keep a part of us safe, a part of our life that can never be bought or sold. I promised her, my heart a lump in my throat. I didn't understand, but I knew she was serious. I held her in my arms, and she just clung to me, her body trembling. I didn't know what she was talking about. I didn't know what she had hidden. But I knew she was serious, and I knew she was scared. The conversation had been so long ago, so buried in the quiet moments of our lives, that I had forgotten it. But now it came back to me, clear and sharp. She had a secret, a safety net, something she had hidden away in case things went wrong, something that would protect me from my own son. But where had she hidden it? I drove on, the memory a ghost in the passenger seat. I thought about all the places we had been together. The lake, the old barn where we used to have picnics, the factory. None of them felt right. But then I remembered. I remembered the last time she had left the house before she got sick. She had been gone for 2 hours. She had come back with a small box in her hands. She had looked at me with a knowing smile and said, I just finished my last project. It's for a rainy day. She had gone into the garage and she had come out with nothing. I had been so busy with my work, so lost in my own exhaustion, that I hadn't even thought to ask her what she had been doing. But now, the pieces clicked into place. The garage. She had hidden something in the garage. Something that was meant to protect me from my son. A last gift. A final act of love. I pulled the truck over, a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The garage. It had to be the garage. The house was now Jared's. But the secret was still there. I had to go back. I had to go back to the house that had been our home. The house that was now a business asset. The house that held Reina's last secret. The old house was unrecognizable. The porch swing was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern bench. The windows were new, with thick, polished frames. The yard was a manicured expanse of perfect green, devoid of the dandelions and wildflowers Reina had always loved. The place felt foreign, a monument to Jareth's cold, soulless ambition. I parked the truck a few blocks away, the familiar rumble of the engine a defiant protest in the quiet suburban street. I felt like a thief, a stranger in my own neighborhood. I walked to the house, my heart a lump of ice in my chest. I saw a construction crew working in the backyard, their faces obscured by hard hats. They were building a new patio, a perfect impersonal slab of concrete. I had to get in without being seen. I snuck around the side of the house, a shadow in the fading twilight. The back door was unlocked, a testament to the carelessness of the construction workers. I slipped inside, the air thick with the smell of fresh paint and sawdust. The rooms were empty, hollowed-out shells of the lives they had once contained. My footsteps echoed in the silence. I felt a wave of despair. This wasn't my home anymore. It was just a house, a business transaction. I made my way to the garage, the one place I knew had to be the same. The smell of oil and gasoline was gone, replaced by the clean, sterile scent of fresh cement. The tools were gone, the old workbenches I had built. The drawers filled with bolts and nuts. It was a blank slate. I felt a wave of nausea. He had erased everything. He had bulldozed over every memory, every moment we had shared. But I knew what I was looking for. The loose floorboard, the one I had installed myself 30 years ago when I was building the garage. I ran my hand over the floor, the cold concrete a stark contrast to my trembling fingers. I found it, a small section of the floor that was not quite flush with the rest. I knelt down, and I pried it open with a screwdriver. There it was, a small wooden box. It was covered in dust, but it was there. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. I opened it, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. Inside there was a single piece of paper, a deed, and a photograph. The photograph was of Reina and me on our wedding day. She was smiling, her eyes full of a quiet, knowing confidence. The deed was to a small plot of undeveloped land she had inherited from her father, a piece of land we had always considered worthless. It was just a patch of woods. It was a place for a cabin we had always dreamed of building. It was a place where we could escape, a place where we could just be. It was our secret. It was our escape. But as I looked at the deed, I saw a small piece of paper, a news clipping, tucked inside. The headline read, "New Interstate Project to Begin Next Year." The article talked about the new highway that was going to be built, a highway that was going to cut right through the middle of the land Reina had inherited. The land we had always considered worthless was now a gold mine. The government needed to buy the land to build the highway. It was worth millions. Not 83 million, but it was still a fortune. It was the real money, the money Reina had always known about. The money she had hidden from me, from Jareth, from everyone. She had kept it for a rainy day. A final gift. A final act of love. She had known Jareth was changing. She had known his ambition would come at a cost. And she had prepared. I felt a wave of emotion, a mix of grief and gratitude. She had saved me. She had given me a way out. She had given me a way to fight back. I stood up, the box in my hands, and I felt a surge of strength. I had the real money. The money that was earned with love, not with greed. The money that was meant to protect us, not to destroy us. The money that was Reina's last gift. I felt a flicker of defiance. I was going to fight back, and I knew exactly how. I was going to use Reina's secret to bring down Jareth's perfect plastic world. I was going to show him that true wealth wasn't in numbers. It was in love. The call to Jareth was different this time. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't sad. My voice was steady, calm, and full of a quiet confidence that startled him. "Jareth," I said, my voice as flat as his, "I need to see you. Now, it's about the truck." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I heard a muffled sound, the sound of his perfect, organized world shifting. "Dad, I'm busy. I can't just drop everything. We can talk about this later." His voice was clipped, professional, but I heard a tremor of fear, a crack in the perfect facade he had built. He knew I had found something. He knew I wasn't a broken, defeated old man anymore. "No, Jareth. Now, meet me at the gas station on the corner of Oak and Elm. The one where I used to work. You know the one." I heard him sigh, a long, exasperated sound. He was annoyed, but he was also rattled. "Fine. 10 minutes, don't be late." He hung up the phone. I smiled. I hadn't smiled in months, but now I felt a flicker of defiance. I was in control now. He was coming to me on my turf. He was coming to the place where I had worked to pay for his dream. He was coming to the place where I had sold my soul for him. He was coming to me. I pulled the truck up to the gas station. The familiar rumble of the engine, a defiant protest in the quiet suburban street. The gas station looked the same, a monument to a past that was long gone. I sat in the truck, the deed to the land in my pocket, the photograph of Reina and me on the dashboard. I felt a surge of calm. I was ready. Jareth pulled up in his new car, a sleek, black thing that looked like it belonged on a movie screen. He got out, his face a mask of annoyance. "Dad, what is this about? I told you, I'm busy. I have a flight to catch." He sounded like a child who was being forced to do something he didn't want to do. He looked at the truck, a look of distaste on his face. "Why is this thing here? I thought I had it handled. Why are you making this difficult?" The words were a slap in the face. He didn't see the history. He didn't see the memories. He just saw a problem that needed to be solved. A nuisance that needed to be eliminated. I just looked at him, my face a mask of quiet calm. "I know you tried to get the truck, Jareth. I know you lied to me. I know you tried to get Boone to sell it to you." The words hit him like a physical blow. His perfect, professional mask cracked. His eyes widened, a flicker of fear in their depths. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice a shaky thing. He was lying, and I knew it. "Jareth, why? Why were you so desperate to get my old truck? You're a man with $83 million. Why do you care about a piece of junk? Tell me the truth." He was silent for a moment, and I saw the mask of indifference fall away. He wasn't a man with a perfect life. He was a man with a secret. A man who was terrified. He looked at me, at the man he had betrayed, and I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who was scared and lost. The boy who was about to tell me the truth. He was no longer a businessman. He was my son. He was a fraud. The facade broke. The perfectly tailored suit. The crisp white shirt. It was all a costume. Jareth's face crumpled, the professional mask dissolving into an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at me, at the man he had wronged, and for the first time in years, he saw me. He saw the love, the pain, the betrayal he had inflicted. He wasn't a businessman anymore. He was a scared little boy. He was a man who was about to lose everything. He started talking, the words spilling out of him in a frantic, incoherent rush. "It was all a lie, Dad. The money, the 83 million, it was never real." The words hit me like a train. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was all a lie. The houses, the cars, the clothes. All of it was a lie. He confessed to everything. The company he had worked for was a sham. The IPO was a legal loophole, a way to sell a dying company for a massive profit. He was in on it, an accomplice. The money was just a number on a page, a number that was about to be wiped away by a massive lawsuit. He was bankrupt. He was about to lose everything. The lawyers, the accountants, the investors, they were all going to come after him. He was a fugitive. He was about to go to jail. I stood there listening to his confession, and I felt a strange sense of, not triumph, not anger, but a deep, profound sadness. I had sacrificed everything for him, and he had thrown it all away for a lie. He had taken our lives, our memories, my wife, and he had thrown it all away for a fake fortune. He was a man with nothing. He had less than I did. I had the truck. I had my memories. He had nothing. I looked at him, at the broken man who was my son, and I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who was scared and lost. The boy who had promised to make us proud. He was on his knees now, a grown man, a supposed millionaire, on his knees on the pavement of a gas station, a broken shell of a man. He was crying now, the tears streaming down his face, a river of regret and despair. I didn't know what to do, Dad. I was just a kid. They promised me the world. They promised me everything. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was making you proud. His voice was a broken whisper, a sound that was so full of pain and regret that it broke my heart. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to tell him it was going to be okay. But it wasn't. It was all a lie. And the lie had a price. He had to pay for it. He had to face the consequences of his actions. I had to let him. I couldn't save him. Not from this. He had made his own bed. He had to lie in it. He looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and regret. Dad, he said, his voice a low plea. I have nothing left. They've taken everything. The accounts are frozen. The house is a liability. The cars are gone. I have nothing left. He paused, and his eyes fell on the truck, on the old rusted-out shell that was a testament to our lives. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. Dad, the truck. They don't know about the truck. It's the only thing not tied to my name. I need it. I need it to get away. I need it to disappear. Please, Dad. Please. It's the only thing I have left. The words were a gut punch. He was begging for the truck. The truck he had called a piece of junk. The truck he had lied about selling. The truck that was a symbol of everything he had betrayed. He was begging for it, and I had the power to give it to him, or to let him face the consequences. He had taken everything from me. He had betrayed me. He had broken my heart. But he was still my son. He was still the boy I had loved. And he was on his knees, begging for my truck. The sight of my son on his knees was a blow harder than any of his betrayals. The slick, polished veneer was gone, replaced by the raw, desperate pain of a cornered animal. He wasn't Jareth, the millionaire. He was just a boy, terrified and broken. His hands, the ones that had signed million-dollar contracts, were now clasped together in a pathetic, pleading gesture. Please, Dad. Please. The words were a whisper, a broken, desperate prayer. He had nothing. The 83 million was a ghost, a number on a page that was about to vanish. The beautiful house, the fancy cars, the private jet, all of it was an illusion, a lie that was about to be exposed. He had gambled with his life, with my life, with my wife's life, and he had lost. Now he had nothing, and he was begging me for the last thing I had left, the last piece of our history, the last piece of Reyna, the truck. My mind raced, a frantic whirl of emotions, rage, betrayal, grief. But underneath it all, a small, quiet voice, the voice of a father who still loved his son, no matter how broken he was. I had a choice. I could let him face the consequences of his actions. I could let the lawyers, the FBI, the investors tear him apart. I could let him go to jail. He had done it to me, hadn't he? He had taken everything. He had thrown me out. He had sold my home. He had killed my wife. He had betrayed me in every way a son can betray a father. He deserved to pay for his crimes. He deserved to lose everything. But as I looked at him, at the broken man on his knees, I saw myself. I saw the man who had worked himself to the bone to give his son a better life. I saw the man who had sacrificed everything for his family. I saw the man who had loved his son more than life itself. I couldn't do it. I couldn't watch him go to jail. I couldn't watch him be torn apart by the world he had tried so hard to conquer. I was a father, and a father protects his son, no matter what. I looked at the truck, at the old, rusted-out shell that was a testament to our history. It wasn't a car. It was a time machine. It was every Saturday we had spent working on it, every trip to the lake, every memory we had shared. It was the last piece of Reyna I had left. And now he wanted to take that too. He wanted to use it to disappear, to escape the consequences of his actions. The choice was agonizing. Do I let him get away with it? Do I sacrifice the last piece of my life to save him? Or do I let him fall? Let him face the consequences. Let him learn a hard lesson. He was my son. He was the boy I had loved. And he was broken. The words I had told him as a boy came back to me. You take care of the things that take care of you. He had forgotten that lesson. He had taken advantage of my love, of my sacrifice. He had used me. But I couldn't give up on him. I couldn't let him fall. I had to save him. The truck was the last piece of our life together. It was the only thing I had left. He was begging for it, and I had the keys in my hand. He was on his knees, a broken, defeated man, his face a mask of terror and regret. He was begging for my truck. My heart was breaking. The silence between us was deafening. He was on his knees on the grimy asphalt of the gas station, a grown man with a broken soul begging me for a beat-up old truck. All the anger, all the resentment, all the betrayal, it evaporated. All I saw was the scared little boy who had clung to my leg, the boy who had promised to make us proud. He had been so lost, so obsessed with a world of numbers and lies, that he had forgotten what was real. The money was a weapon, a curse that had consumed him. It had turned him into a monster, but now it was gone, and all that was left was my son. The last piece of Rena, the truck, was the only thing I had left, and he was begging me for it. I thought of Rena, her quiet strength, her unyielding love. I thought of her last gift, the deed to the land, the real money. She had given me a way out. She had given me a way to protect us, and now I was going to use it. I had to save him. I took a step forward, and I reached out my hand. He flinched, a quiet, broken sound. He thought I was going to hit him. I just shook my head, my heart breaking for him. I put my hand on his shoulder, and I looked at him, at the broken man who was my son. Jareth, I said, my voice a quiet whisper. The truck, it was never just a piece of junk. It was a promise you broke. But I'm not going to let you fall. I'm not going to let you go to jail. I'm a father, and a father protects his son. I pulled the deed to the land out of my pocket, the weathered paper a testament to Rena's love. He looked at it, his eyes wide with confusion. What is this? He asked, his voice a shaky thing. It's the real money, son, the real fortune. Your mother left it for a rainy day. It's a piece of land she inherited. It was worthless then, but now it's a gold mine. There's a new highway being built, and the government needs to buy it. It's worth millions. He looked at me, at the deed, and then back at me. He was speechless. He had spent his life chasing a lie, and the real truth, the real fortune, had been there all along. I put the deed in his trembling hand. Sell it, Jareth. Pay off your debts. Start over. This is your chance. Your mother gave you a second chance. Don't waste it. I took the keys to the truck, the keys he had begged me for, and I put them in his hand. The truck, it's yours now. Use it to disappear. Use it to get away. Find a new life. A real life. And don't ever forget where you came from. He just looked at me, a mess of tears and snot, his face a mask of regret. He was a boy again, a boy who was being given a second chance. He looked at the keys, at the deed, and then back at me. He looked at me, and he saw the man who had loved him, the man who had sacrificed everything for him. He saw the truth. I just nodded. I turned and I walked away. I didn't look back. I got into a taxi I had called earlier, a silent promise of a new life. As the taxi pulled away, I looked at Jareth in the rearview mirror, standing on the pavement of the gas station, a broken man who was now a millionaire. He was holding the keys to the truck, a silent testament to a life that was gone forever. He had everything he had ever wanted, but he had lost himself in the process. I looked at the photograph of Rena on the dashboard, her quiet, knowing smile a comfort. She had known he would come back, and she had given me a way to save him. I had sacrificed everything, but I had saved my son. The journey was over. I had found my peace.